Story 1. A teacher friend told me that for years she has been seeing the ability to interact with technology decline. She says many of her students now basically have the same ability to solve problems on a computer that you would expect from your grandparents. I suspect growing up in the very curated world of tablets and applications has allowed them to skip all the troubleshooting lessons millennials had to learn on old computers and the early internet. Story 2. I graduated over 10 years ago with a class filled with seniors who had to slowly sound out every letter. Are you saying it has gotten worse? Story 3. I teach high school math. I have encountered many students who were operating at about a second grade level in math. Seniors who could not do 2 times 3 in their heads. Juniors who did not know what a square root was. Seniors who could not solve for x in x plus 1 equals 8. Freshmen who could not add or subtract. I had one sophomore this year who could not understand 20 more than in a certain type of problem. I tried for a few minutes before saying, let's say you and I go into a store. I am going to buy some number of apples and you plan on buying 20 more apples than I buy. If I buy 5 apples, how many would you buy? They said, 20. Story 4. Not really a story, but my mom is a 5th grade teacher, and she has told me that about 50 to 60% of her students do not know how to read. It is very sad to hear about. Story 5. My friend teaches 5th grade. He is just now getting the students who were learning to read when the coronavirus disease happened. He said several of them cannot tell time on a digital clock. Story 6. Not a teacher but an educator at a museum. I had a parent allow their child around 3 to 5 years old. I had no exact idea of their age, but they were walking and talking, though still quite small, to open random drawers and cabinets, including a cleaning supplies closet, and attempt to play with industrial-grade cleaning materials. When I asked her to stop, she told me I was discouraging his creativity and argued that since we are an interactive museum, everything is part of the exhibit, which is not true. When I asked him to stop, she stormed off. The issue here is primarily with the parents, but I have also seen this type of behavior from children who, in theory, should know not to play in a janitor's closet or, in one case, climb on a 1905 fire truck behind ropes with a sign that says, "Do not touch." At times, we had to lock up our chickens. We had an outdoor component in a tall fenced area or leave them in the coop all day because children tried to ride the chickens like horses. No chickens were hurt or threw items like pencils at them. While this was happening, the parents were nowhere to be found or did not intervene at all. I do not blame the children for any of this, as it is primarily a parenting issue. Both being too strict or mean and being practically absent contribute to bad behavior, along with excessive device use by both kids and parents, especially parents who use devices as a way to quiet their children. Children are little people, not accessories or robots to be programmed to behave as their parents wish through beating or shouting. Working with your children, explaining why certain rules exist, and enforcing reasonable and logical consequences are how you can help improve behavior. I have had many children who were considered bad kids come through my museum and behave well because I treated them with respect and provided structure through my lessons, which included them. I understand not everyone can be as freeform in teaching or parenting, but it is never the child's fault. Even if their behavior made my job harder, I never blamed them. Life is challenging when you are new to the world and trying to figure everything out. The least we can do is be good examples, even if our paths cross only once. Story 7. A high school student asked me what it means to explain something in his own words instead of copying and pasting. Story 8. One of my 4th graders was provisionally promoted from 3rd grade in the middle of the school year. He was reading at a 1st grade level when he arrived in my class. He quickly reached his suspension limit because he was constantly fighting with other kids instead of trying to learn. The guidance counselor pulled him out one afternoon to do a therapeutic art project. That's how we discovered that he does not know his shapes either. It was one of the worst cases of educational neglect that I have seen. Of course, the parent was upset that her child was not on the honor roll and demanded to know why he was failing every subject. The regional superintendent overruled us and promoted him to 5th grade. Story 9. I was an elementary school substitute teacher for many years. Phonics is no longer taught in our district, and math drills are not done in class. They are supposed to be done at home by the parents, but that does not happen. As a result, the children do not develop the muscle memory for the basics, which prevents them from thinking through the rest of the problem. Our district adopted the concept of spiral math, where children are introduced to advanced math concepts, such as negative numbers, each year starting in first grade. However, they do not go into depth with the basics. They see the same concept the following year and still do not understand it. This continues until middle school. By then, students have decided math is a mysterious black hole. They dislike it and avoid it whenever possible. Teaching became frustrating, and it was painful to see the dread and confusion on their faces whenever math was taught. We can do better. Story 10. I asked an undergraduate student for their opinion on a text. They pulled out their phone, typed my question into Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and then read aloud the answer it gave. Story 11. Only 27% of the incoming 6th graders at the local middle school are proficient in mathematics skills. Additionally, there are almost no problem-solving skills or critical thinking skills, with many students exhibiting a do-it-for-me or I am not doing that mindset toward schoolwork. Students can submit no assignments for a class and still pass. Motivation is no longer required. For reference on how troubling the mathematics proficiency percentage is, 6th grade math skills should include basic work with fractions, finding averages of a group of numbers, reading graphs or charts, basic decimal operations, finding percents, and so on. Multiplication charts are now given instead of requiring memorization of basic multiplication facts. Story 12. In the last year alone, I can think of 3 students who got caught touching themselves in class while making eye contact with another student. We had a student running a full drug operation out of the boys' bathroom. Vapes, marijuana, cigarettes, and a burner phone to conduct transactions. When I try to tell them their written work is completely unintelligible due to incoherent grammar and lack of basic sentence structure, I am met with, "I said what I said." If you can't understand it, then that is your problem. Commas are too difficult a concept. Welcome to middle school. Story 13. I have taught 9th through 12th grade for the last 9 years. The most challenging thing for me is that students cannot think critically. Problem solving, troubleshooting, reasoning, there are many students with limited processing ability, and it seems to be getting rapidly worse in the past couple of years. I believe it is because of TikTok. Students do not even have time to think about the short piece of media they just consumed before the next one appears. Story 14. Currently studying to be a teacher. In one of my in-school placements, students came up to me and asked what time it was. I would always look at the clock on the wall, which they had a clear view of, and tell them the time. None of the children aged 12 to 14 knew how to read a clock. I even explained how to read it to a few of them, and they looked at me as if I had 2 heads. Story 15. My partner is a teacher and has come home several times telling me about 10 and 11-year-old kids who cannot use a ruler. They cannot use it to measure a straight line. They cannot use it to draw a straight line. They cannot use it to connect 2 points. They just do not know how to use it at 10+ years old. Story 16. I had a pre-kindergarten student whose speech was unintelligible. He could not communicate. I told his mother he needed to be tested for speech therapy, and she replied, "Oh, so he won't baby talk anymore? I'm going to miss hearing that." Story 17. They are not good at problem solving or self-reflection. They struggle to pay attention. When asked a question, they look at you as if you will provide the answers. There is no initiative, drive, or curiosity. Story 18. A friend is a music teacher in high school. He said that he has not observed Generation Alpha brain rot in his students. He thinks it is specifically because music is an antidote for brain rot. It encourages patience and attentiveness. Story 19. More hilarious than terrifying. My good friend is a high school teacher, usually teaching seniors. One day she gave a research assignment about the legend of Sleepy Hollow. One of the papers she received really confused her because it started discussing mysteries and time travel. Then she realized the student had done the old, look up the Wikipedia article and write about that, but had accidentally pulled up the 2013 television show. Story 20. I wanted to be a teacher and student taught in an area where parents felt like their children were always right. One parent called the school board, All 7 members, because her child didn't feel challenged enough in class. My students were freshmen, and as an introductory exercise for the house on Mango Street, I asked the kids to illustrate what their ideal home would look like. That was it. That was what offended the child so much that the parent called for my immediate removal. She never contacted me directly to discuss her concerns. I had to hear about it from the principal since she hung up on me when I called to ask what I had done wrong. When I told her child I had no problem giving him more challenging assignments, he balked, stating he wasn't interested in working harder. I asked him then what his intention was in trying to get me fired. He stopped complaining after that. I had another student who cheated. I caught her, told her she needed to accept a 0, and wished her good luck in summer school. The parents insisted I provide a makeup opportunity, but I refused. They involved the principal and assistant principal. The student ended up failing the class and attending summer school. I finished my student teaching successfully and bowed out. If this was a glimpse into my professional life, it wasn't for me. The pay isn't enough to raise other people's difficult children. Story 21. I teach college. The number of students who cannot compose a basic research paper is depressing. I had one student research a company, but the company's name had changed a few years earlier. Clearly, she was plagiarizing from an earlier student's paper. I told her repeatedly that Company A is now called Company B. By calling it Company A, it was clear that she had not even visited the company's current website, which was a requirement for the paper. She ignored me, continued to call it Company A, and failed. Story 22. Almost weekly occurrence in my high school teacher friend's classroom. Teacher: Hey, where's your laptop? Student: It's in my bag. Teacher: Why isn't it out? Student: It's dead. Teacher: Where's your charger? Student: At home, I think. Teacher: Perhaps one of the other 20 students in this room has a charger you can borrow? Student: Maybe. Asterisk stares blankly for 5 seconds. Asterisk. Teacher: Well, are you going to ask someone? Student: Oh, right. Can I borrow a charger? My buddy says it's like they have no ability to pivot to plan B when plan A fails. Story 23. One of my ex-partners had an 11-year-old daughter who could not read. I was flabbergasted when she went to the bathroom and then asked which was the hand sanitizer and which was the hand soap. They were both in their original labeled bottles. Story 24. We had a child who did not know that deserts are dry. Also, hardly any of them know the difference between vowels and consonants. Thank you, Lucy Calkins. Story 25. Lack of critical thinking and reasoning skills is the biggest issue for me. Also, a lack of curiosity about the world around them. Repeating memes is the worst, I think. It seems to really kill any imagination that children used to have. Story 26. Elementary physical education teacher here. The number of children biting when angry is terrifying. I have several who will chase a child down after feeling wronged, grab their arm, and bite them like a dog. So far, they are all under 7 years old, but I have encountered 4 in different classes. That is a specific problem. In general, the situation feels hopeless. Story 27. Not me, but my mom is a preschool teacher. Her class currently has one particular student whose behavior is so bad that the other children are terrified of him, and he has managed to injure the staff a couple of times. A 4 or 5-year-old has injured grown adults on multiple occasions. Granted, some of her students have special needs, so I do not know if this child just has behavioral issues or if it is a Generation Alpha thing. She has stated that he needs to be in a different class that is better equipped to handle him, so honestly, I have no idea. Side note, I actually worked at the preschool where she works briefly back in 2022 as an assistant teacher's aide, and it was a nightmare. I am now genuinely scared of preschoolers. They genuinely make me nervous when I am around them. I do not hate kids. I fear them. That job was so stressful that it gave me an irrational fear of preschoolers. In summary, Generation Alpha preschoolers are scary. Story 28. During a project week, we had a first grader who could barely speak our national language or even his mother tongue, but he communicated using memes like a professional. Story 29. Not a teacher, but I was a classroom assistant to a group of 12 and 13-year-olds. Most of them could read. Some had reading difficulties, but spelling and grammar were generally poor. I knew a couple of children who really struggled with open-ended questions and drawing conclusions from contextual clues. As for behavior, where to begin? I knew the principal of the school where I worked did not really believe in disciplining children, thinking that everything could be resolved over a cup of tea and a chat. Teachers have been reprimanded by the senior management team for telling children off for their behavior when the children clearly deserved it. I knew a child who was a nightmare, constantly in trouble, disrespectful to all staff, and often confrontational. They were once supposed to be suspended for a week after being caught with a vape, which did not happen because their parents left them at the school regardless. The parents believed all behavioral issues reported by the school were untrue. This child also had to be separated from their supposed best friend for a period because they told the friend that they were adopted and their mother did not love them. Then, this child went around telling all their friends not to talk to the best friend because they were adopted and their mother did not love them. The child was confused and upset when the best friend and several other friends stopped talking to them. I also know another classroom assistant who is assigned to an 8-year-old in a primary school. This child actively hits the assistant daily, refuses to do any kind of work to the point that their education has severely suffered, and has even threatened to stab the assistant. Story 30. My mom and her sister worked in education for a long time. They both retired around 10 years ago, but as they were getting closer to retirement, every year they said, "The kids and parents are worse every year." I believe that. I spent a brief time working in adult probation. Many kids with parents who enable them end up there. I dealt with many parents of young adults who would call and try to schedule probation appointments for their children. They were furious when we told them no. Their children needed to attend themselves. They would try to come to probation appointments with them. They would say things like, "You mean their alleged crime?" And I would correct them, saying, "It is not alleged once you are convicted." You would meet or talk to these parents and feel sorry for them. Their children had no chance with parents like that. Many parents today only want their children to be happy, but in reality, they have no idea what it takes to make a person happy. They say these younger people are anxious and depressed. Clearly, being poorly educated, unable to solve basic problems, or understand how to function successfully in an already hard world does not make a person happy. But parents insist on sending their children to school in bubble wrap to ensure no one pops any of their bubbles and sends them back exactly the same. Their children are miserable, emotionally stunted, and totally unprepared for reality as a result. No one wants to seriously discuss the fact that the problem lies entirely with the parents. You can have all the school funding on earth, but if you are serving parents who want nannies and not educators, you end up where we are. Story 31. I have pupils in their teens who, despite being perfectly bright, cannot do mathematics beyond a primary school level and have absolutely no motivation to practice. They are just waiting until they can start using calculators. They cannot even gauge whether the answers derived that way are likely to be correct or not because the fundamental understanding is not there. What is deeply frustrating is the contradiction in modern teaching methods. On one hand, we acknowledge that pupils are fundamentally free agents and thus cannot be forced to learn. But as teachers, we are held accountable for their behavior. Story 32. I work at a summer camp. Last week, they were building mini off-brand Lego bricks, and I was helping a child because the instructions were more complicated than regular Lego sets. He had to arrange 5 pieces to match the picture in the instructions. The child spent over 5 minutes trying to arrange the pieces but could not do it. The child was in 4th or 5th grade. Story 33. I'm not saying which city, but my ex in Ohio is friends with a pair of siblings. The brother recently became a police deputy. He is illiterate and has misspelled his own name before. Story 34. Not a teacher, but when I was at trade school for my electrical certification, the number of high school students who came straight into trade school and couldn't do basic math or read the provided workbooks and retain the most basic information was incredible. By the end of the first semester, 50% of them couldn't tell you what voltage was, and 80% couldn't calculate voltage, current, or resistance. It is literally a formula: voltage equals current multiplied by resistance, where you just plug the numbers in and get the answer. The second semester left us with a class of 3 high school students who had good heads on their shoulders. The rest were people like me, aged 25 to 40 years old, who were changing careers. Story 35. Generation Z and not a teacher. Sometimes I am absolutely baffled by the lack of reading comprehension, work ethic, and critical thinking skills among my own peers. How in God's green earth is it getting worse? Story 36. Not in my class, but just yesterday, we were at a coffee shop and 2 of the girls did not recognize a quarter. One asked the other, "Is this a nickel? Wait, is a nickel only 5 cents? Then they tried to flag us down for stiffing them, and I said, "A quarter is 25 cents. How did they get the job as cashiers? We are doomed." Story 37. I always thought these stories were exaggerated, but I teach private piano lessons and had a 9 or 10-year-old girl a few months ago who admitted that she could not read her very basic beginner-level music theory book, nor could she write very well. This was the first time I have seen this in person after decades of teaching. Story 38. I work for a school transportation department, and when I am not in the office, I am a permanent substitute who fills in for absent bus drivers. Each bus is parked in the same lane at the schools every day, regardless of who is driving. Most students walk up to the bus, and if they see it is not their regular driver, they look around in confusion and start wandering aimlessly. I tell them every time it will be in the same lane regardless of the driver, but I drive the same route once or twice every week, and the same unaware students end up wandering every time. If an observant student does not redirect them, dismissal is delayed while administrators search for the correct bus. It does not help that many students do not know their address or subdivision. High school is the worst about this. I have done this for 11 years, and it seems to get worse every year. I drive for some of the top academic schools in the state. Story 39. I teach college mathematics, and I had a student in Calculus 3 who needed a calculator to do 1.7 times 10 because they struggled with decimals. Story 40. My 7th and 8th graders frequently perform Nazi salutes, draw swastikas on boards, and use the racial slur. The surprising part is that I teach in Hong Kong, and 99% of the students in our school are Chinese. It is an English medium school, and all our students have good to fluent levels of English, so the argument that they do not know better, which other teachers in my school often use, is invalid. Story 41. The big moment for me was teaching a 10th grade chemistry class. I walked past a student who was not even trying to do the work, so I sat down to walk them through it. After waiting what felt like 2 minutes for them to read 3 sentences, I asked them what the universal solvent was. I had to physically point to the word water for them to understand. They responded, "Oh yeah, water is in everything, right? Because water is clear, so you can put anything in it." I then had to sit down and have a crisis. Story 42. My own parents taught me how to read before I even entered 1st grade. The generation of parents that raised these children are the true failures. Story 43. It's the parents too. I know someone who works in a zoo and is surprised by the number of people who try to climb into the animal exhibits, such as a 15-year-old trying to climb into a pen with 3 adult lions. Story 44. So here is the thing. My children are Generation Alpha. I know them not to be unintelligent. This is not just wishful thinking on my part. They have great grades. One is a sophomore political science major on track to graduate early. The younger sibling has been aiming for forensic science since they were 5. Both are extremely mature conversationalists, emotionally more intelligent than I am. However, I wince when I read something they have written. The spelling, the grammar, and the difficulty they have getting across what they are trying to communicate. It is the internet. I think we on this side of the internet forget that, incredibly, Reddit users are well-spoken for the most part, including English as a second language users. The kids are on TikTok and have this absurdist humor they like that frankly is not smart. I do not know. Maybe it is the 1990s sarcasm that shaped me. Edited to add, I know this is incoherent at best. I am under the influence. Story 45. I was a counselor at a summer camp. On the second day, the boys asked me to convince one 12-year-old boy to shower because he refused to. After I resorted to dragging him into the bathroom, He looked at the shower head and asked, "What do I do?" I had to explain how to take a shower. Eventually, he did while I stood outside and waited. He is 12 years old, and his parents still bathe him. Story 46. Almost a decade in education now. These children have zero attention span. Absolutely none. They are so influenced by YouTube and TikTok they need constant stimulus. Non-stop engagement, no lull, no downtime, just distraction after distraction. Bursts of noise, color, and stimulus in 10-second increments, shaped by too much unrestricted access to social media. It is both sad and frightening. Story 47. Not a teacher, but several people in my family are primary school teachers and teachers' assistants. Most recent story I was told. For Children's Day, my cousin made bracelets to give to her third grade class with the phrase, "Happy Children's Day." A few of the kids could not read it. She cannot force the kids to learn because the parents complain that she is abusing the kids by trying to teach them. Story 48. My aunt teaches in a middle school in Rhode Island. She told me a story about how her 6th and 7th graders could not tell her the name of the state or city where they live. She asked them to name the states in the New England region. One of them said Alabama, and another said China. Story 49. My girlfriend is a teacher. She was saying how one of the 15-year-old students was talking about how he is going to be 6 feet tall because both his father and his stepfather are tall men. He is about 5 feet 2 inches at 15, by the way. Story 50. I teach high school seniors and am trying to bring back pen and paper schooling. Students do not know how to use staplers. This is not an isolated incident. One student broke my stapler trying to refill it because he did not realize you could break or shorten the replacement staples. Many do not know which side to staple or how to line up pages. Today, a student claimed a stapler was broken because they did not push it down hard enough until it stapled. With so many things done online, they struggle with paper. It is depressingly defeating at times. Story 51. This generation is going to face many problems. It is not due to the teachers, the curriculum, lack of discipline, or any other factors people may blame. The main reason is that politicians are dismantling school systems at all levels. If students cannot read in your school system, it is because wealthy individuals have decided to remove essential resources from your schools. Story 52. I worked at a preschool for a few years in high school. I worked Monday through Friday and built close relationships with the children. I was surprised to hear one of the 4-year-olds talk about Andrew Tate. His parents allowed him to use unrestricted YouTube. I was so shocked that I did not know what to do. Story 53. This is an old story from the early 1990s. When I was almost done with my Master of Engineering and applying for jobs, a girl who was finishing her Bachelor of Science in Engineering also asked me to help her with her resume. Her resume was, "Dear Sir or Madam, my name is Name. I am graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Name. I would like to apply for a position in your company." That was it. There were spelling errors and grammatical mistakes in that short paragraph. I laughed out loud when I saw it, and she got embarrassed and ran away. A few days later, she caught up with me in the lab and told me she got the job. I received only one job interview after sending nearly 2,000 resumes over 2 years, but did not get the job. I switched my career to information technology and got a job in 6 weeks. I have had a good career working for over 30 years. And after being laid off, I cannot find anything anymore. I bet that girl must be the chief executive officer or something very successful in her career. I guess luck is more important than anything else. Story 54. I teach high school, and I have general education students who are about to be adults and do not know left from right without making an L shape with their hands to double check. I also have students use search engines for basic math calculations. I would tolerate searching for something like 483 times 13, but 4 times 2 is something that should be done in your head almost immediately. Story 55. I gave a cashier a $20 bill and 39 cents for an item that cost $5.39. He was completely unable to give me the correct change. He tried incorrectly twice. Then he asked, "How much do I owe you?" The bagger and a customer behind me witnessed this. Scary. Story 56. My wife is a trainer in a profession that requires very fast and accurate typing. You would be surprised, but from late millennials onward, the general public's ability to touch type is declining. These days, more people fail the typing speed and accuracy test than pass it, and the requirement is only 50 words per minute and 95% spelling accuracy. Story 57. Middle school teacher. My students were born in 2011 and 2012 this year. My difficult experience. Generation Z and their Generation X parents. That was a challenging generation with a lot of permissive parenting and teenagers who walked all over their parents. Generation Alpha actually is not that bad so far. Story 58. They are so lazy in French class that they do not change the default language in Google Translate and sometimes hand in work in German or Spanish. It is the bare minimum. Story 59. I have had a student use artificial intelligence on fully opinion-based questions several times. Students are not even reading the question or the answer from the internet. One quiz question asks students to share their comfort level with performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A student said, "As an artificial intelligence, I cannot perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation." Someone used artificial intelligence to rank my classroom values, such as respect, integrity, and resiliency. Artificial intelligence is so new that no one knows how to use it effectively as a learning tool. It is evolving faster than we can harness. Story 60. Not a teacher, not Generation Alpha, but I used to vet candidates for an entry-level job opening. Literacy skills were required, and a shocking number of young American applicants submitted terrible resumes and applications. There was no spell check, inconsistent punctuation, and they did not consistently capitalize their own names. One person even misspelled their own name and did not correct it. I assumed her preferred name might be different from her legal name, but no, she just misspelled it and did not fix it. That does not even begin to describe the troubling contents of these documents. For example, when asked, "Reason for leaving last job?" one applicant responded, "Manager was a liar. We believed the applicant, but professionalism is important." Story 61. At the school where I used to work, a high school senior misspelled Jersey as Jersey on a handwritten assignment. He lived in New Jersey. Story 62. I have 7th graders who do not know how to look up questions. I was teaching them how to cite sources and gave them the task of finding a fact about an animal and showing where they found the fact. Several students asked, "How do I find the fact?" Technology literacy and reading comprehension are at an all-time low. During the same assignment, I told them, Google is not a source. It is a search engine. Artificial intelligence is not a source. It is basically an upgraded autocomplete. Multiple students wrote Google as their source and argued with me when I said I needed the website, not just Google. They could not look 2 lines down to see where the website URL was in the overview. Story 63. I'm not a teacher, just an older millennial college student. Some of my peers are my age, but many of them are Generation Z. Part of my grade for my government class is discussion board participation. The professor requires 300 to 400 words for the initial post, with a minimum of 2 cited sources. He was not particular about MLA or APA citations. He just wanted you to follow the format he requested. I cannot tell you how many Generation Z students could not spell. Some were clearly using artificial intelligence tools to generate their responses. A few had 1 or 2 misspelled sentences with no sources cited. They did not follow basic directions. It was mind-boggling. Story 64. I left teaching in 2023. I taught an earth science class, mostly sophomores, 15-year-olds. One of the questions on a test about plate tectonics said, "What do Chile, California, Alaska, and Japan have in common?" I was looking for anything related to the Ring of Fire. Even just saying something like, "They're on a fault line" or "they get earthquakes" would have been good enough. Someone answered, "They are all in America." Story 65. I am not a teacher, but I saw someone asking online for dubbed anime recommendations to show her students for an anime club. She openly said she was more interested in being the cool adult and had no interest in helping them practice reading, when some people suggested dubs with closed captions because she said the kids cannot read. Story 66. My administrator overrode the grades of me and the other 3 teachers of the core 8th grade subjects and promoted 14 students to 9th grade who are reading at a 5th grade level or lower. All failed 3 or 4 of the 4 state tests, on which passing is 40 to 50% depending on the subject. Story 67. People commenting should have to state their nationality, so I still have hope the kids in my country are not complete imbeciles. Story 68. Mine is the range of ages that know the reference hawk-twa and find it funny to make sexual noises. For example, when I was teaching about animals and discussing predators such as hawks, the 3rd grade class absolutely lost it and started yelling, "Spit on that thing." Even kids down to kindergarten make random moans and high-pitched sounds just because they think it's funny. I doubt most fully understand the reference. Story 69. Today was the first day of the last week of school at the middle school where I teach. Grades are due to be posted tomorrow, so none of us are assigning any graded work this week, and the students know it. They just returned their Chromebooks to the library, and they are not allowed to use their phones at school. They do not know what to do with themselves. They are becoming unruly. They cannot spend 20 minutes chatting among themselves without it turning into chaos. Even if I put on a movie, they cannot pay attention to it. Only a handful of them read for fun, and in a classroom full of noisy 13-year-olds, they cannot focus on it anyway. Today, I confiscated phones from 2 students who have never had their phones taken before because they cannot stand being disengaged. If I do come up with something for them to do, they do not do it because it is not graded. It is all very difficult. Story 70. So not a horror story. My child is hyperlexic and taught himself to read at 4 despite me never really trying to teach him anything. We use a tablet and television a lot, and we read to him nightly, but I wouldn't say we were super dedicated. I have always thought that I am not going to push academics on children before they are in school, but I am not going to discourage curiosity either. He will be going into kindergarten this fall reading chapter books, adding and subtracting double-digit numbers in his head, and doing some multiplication. I am not going to pretend this is because of my amazing parenting or something. We spend a lot of time out with friends or at the park, and when we are home, we use a lot of screens. I am sure a lot of it is his personality and natural inclinations, but I just do not know how people are letting it get this bad on a mass scale. I do not know what school is going to look like for him if his peers are struggling with the basics these days in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Story 71. You don't turn your work in? That's a 50 now, not a 0. Yes, a 50. Some of the nicest liberal individuals do this, and I am pretty socially liberal. But not that liberal. Let's do the math. For assignments, get a 100 on 1 and skip 3. You should have a 25. You did a quarter of the work. Parents called. The student punished or supported depending on the situation. Progress. But now, that student has a 62.5. Not smart, but they pass. They pass by doing a quarter of the work. No meetings. Back to the Xbox. Where is my vape pen? Let's watch TV with dinner and play video games. No time for homework. Why? You can do 1/4 of the work and be fine. This is happening everywhere in the United States. Every day. And we wonder why we are producing underqualified individuals. The best solution for every school is to bring back failing and repeating a grade. Fail twice and here is your broom, or be directed to jobs that do not require schooling. This would solve a lot of problems in 5 years. But no. Story 72. When I taught 6th grade science in 2018, I had students who could not use scissors to cut paper and glue it down. I am not just talking about playing around with glue and scissors. I think children will always do that, and it can be annoying. But I had about 5 to 10 students in each class of 30 unable to cut 8 shapes and glue them onto paper within 40 minutes. It was like an interactive science notebook I had to partially abandon halfway through the year because students could not cut and paste in a notebook. I even started to pre-cut everything for them, but I did not have time to do that every day. It seemed like a fine motor skill issue, but these were not students I would identify as having a motor skill disorder. It was as if they could not hold the scissors tightly enough or hold a glue stick correctly. I wondered if they had never done it before, which made me sad, as if they never played around in elementary school with cutting and gluing paper, or if typing more versus writing and holding a pencil had an effect on this. Story 73. Less of a reading task and more focused on critical thinking skills. I was working in 5th grade English language arts and social studies at the time. A student came up and asked why the crayons were racist because the black ones had a bad word on them. That word was Negro, the Spanish word for black. The student is bilingual and speaks Spanish at home. Story 74. The development seems very unevenly distributed. Some children are completely mentally distracted by apps and TikTok, but some are prodigies. I am not a teacher, but I occasionally volunteer my time to teach children technical topics so they can identify early if they may want to be an engineer or scientist. I was teaching about three-dimensional printing to a class of 6 to 10-year-olds. Some of them obviously had no idea what was going on despite my best efforts, but some were fully up to speed within 20 minutes. One of these children was teaching the others about the metric system while I took a short break. It was awesome. Story 75. My aunt teaches 1st grade. There are 2 children still in diapers. A special aide comes to change them. She says that it is disruptive when they get up to stand in the corner to defecate. They do not go to the bathroom. They apparently both have medical conditions, constipation. I am not joking. Story 76. I have taught in both Canada and Texas. The difference in academic ability and curriculum was stark between the two. Students in Texas thought rocks were living creatures. They could barely write a legible sentence, could not create and deliver a professional presentation, and could not do simple mathematics. My weakest students in Canada were comparable to some of my strongest students in Texas. All my experiences were in publicly funded schools. I have more stories about the differences if anyone is interested. Story 77. I teach 7th grade mathematics. I have students who cannot tell you what 4 multiplied by 2 is. I also have students who cannot read a sentence without me having to step in and pronounce the words for them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.